And that brings us to the president's former White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, who's written a new book about his experience. It is called The Briefing. Sean, good morning to you.
Good morning. I picked a quiet week to launch a book.
I was going to say, is this a week you're glad you're not in your old job?
Look, I've said before, it was an honor to serve this country and this administration, but there's not a day that I go by that I don't miss standing at that podium. I miss the people tremendously. But I've enjoyed being able to spend some time.
It would be a tough job this week.
I don't think it's been a tough job every week and every day.
Do you think the president blew it with Vladimir Putin this week?
I'm glad that he clarified his comments, put it that way.
Is that a yes?
No, I think that it's very important to be clear that Russia meddled in our elections and also clear that there is no evidence of collusion, which the president has done.
He wasn't clear at the press conference.
What I said, though, is I'm glad that he's been clear about it. He talked about it last night with Jeff Glor and CBS. He talked about it at the cabinet meeting the other day.
Why wasn't he clear about it right there in front of Vladimir Putin? Was he afraid?
The president's not afraid of anything. I think the bottom line is that he clearly said that he meant to say something different. I'll let Sarah in the White House deal with that.
And it's interesting to have him come out the next day and say, oh, it was a double negative. If you take this one sentence, I should have said there's no reason Russia wouldn't do it. I mean, that might work if that were the only sentence in question. But here's a situation where he fails to call out Vladimir Putin when given the direct opportunity, calls him strong and powerful, says he finds the denials to be strong and powerful, and literally blames America in front of Vladimir Putin. Can you defend that?
Look, I'm not going to defend anything. That's not my job anymore. What I can tell you is I know what the president believes. I know that he understands that Russia meddled in our election. I also believe that he tries to, as a deal maker, as a non-politician, he wants to get a deal with Russia where we have agreement in our national and economic security.
Don't you want to seem strong if you're in a deal?
I think he is strong. He has sanctioned individuals. He has increased the sanctions with respect to Crimea. He has expelled other diplomats. He has closed to consulates. I mean, he has been tough on Russia, and to act as though he hasn't taken action.
But not at the very moment when he actually has the eyes of the world upon him. He's got Vladimir Putin
fair
right
enough,
there.
and he went and clarified it. And you know what? All I can say is that he did on Tuesday go out at that cabinet meeting and make it clear what his intentions were. In the interview last night with Jeff Glor, he made it very clear that he holds Putin accountable and that he blames Russia.
Right, but even in the clarification, he did say might be others.
It could. I mean.
Okay. Do you think that the Mueller probe is a political witch hunt, as the president continually says?
As of now, I've seen no evidence that it is. I think that it's been going on a long time, and I think there's two issues. One, as I mentioned earlier, there's the collusion, which we've seen no evidence of so far.
With the investigations ongoing.
Correct.
There have been 3 guilty pleas from former Trump associates.
That have nothing to do with actually collusion. They have to do with lying and not registering properly. But secondly,
but why would you lie to federal investigators?
I don't know. I wouldn't. How's that?
Yeah.
But with respect to the meddling, that's another thing. And you've seen now multiple Russians indicted by Special Prosecutor Mueller.
Yeah. Let's talk about your time at the podium.
Sure.
Was there ever a time that the president asked you to lie?
No.
Was there ever a time that he wanted you to say something that you felt was untrue or on the line?
Well, look, in the book that comes out next week, I go through a lot of the big seminal moments. Obviously, it covers a heck of a lot more than, I'm a small kid from a small state in Rhode Island. My parents were not politically active. We were active civically, and so to rise to become White House press secretary was an unbelievable honor. I walk through all of that in the book, but I talk about all of those big seminal moments. But there were times when I would give the president advice and counsel as a spokesman and say, I think this would be better. And the president would either agree with me, but that's been very similar throughout my career.
Is the president a truthful person?
I believe so.
You never felt like he had you go out there and stick your neck out for claims he knew to be false?
Look, he's the ultimate salesman. I think he talks about it in his books, how he uses hyperbole to sell issues, and that's how he is. He's a salesman and a negotiator and a businessman first and foremost.
But do you regret sticking your neck out for some of his more outlandish claims that were proven to be false? I'm thinking about, for example, the inauguration crowd size, the 3 to 5 million fraudulent votes during the election, having tapes of Comey in the Oval Office. I mean, those are 3 examples of things that are now known not to be.
I appreciate you keeping it to 3.
Yeah, I mean, there could be more. There literally could be more.
It's a 250-page book.
Yes.
Look, are there things that I wish I could have a do-over on? Absolutely. But you bring up the inauguration. The president wasn't pleased with me either. I walk through that in the book, and I talk about how, look, there are days when I stepped in it. And would I take a do-over? Absolutely. So I use this book to walk through and to explain to people. It's not as easy. I think it's one thing to look at a one-dimensional guy standing at a podium and say, I can't believe you said this. Part of what I wanted to do by writing this book is to explain to people what was going on behind the scenes. But on that particular day, the president wasn't happy either. I mean,
but he's the one who wanted you to go out there and say the inauguration.
But you know what, Savannah? I'll be honest, and it's all in the book. But I own that. I screwed that day up. The only two people at the end of the day that were happy with me, and I don't even think happy with me, that were supportive of me, were my wife, who's been amazing, and my mom.
Fair enough, but you're being pretty generous because he's the one who said, "Get out there." You thought you were going to set up your office that day.
Right, but he said, I want it corrected. What I did is I went out and interpreted what he wanted and did it in a way that I know that he wasn't pleased with.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, as you say. The book comes out. It's called The Briefing. By the way, you're going to be on with Megyn Kelly today a little bit later this morning. Yep. Sean Spicer, thank you very much.
Savannah.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.